In this video, I'm going to be talking about value, performance, and goals. And why I'm going to be discussing these three concepts? Well, the reason why goes to that diagram we presented in the first video. That diagram that was connecting the firm, the internal analysis, the what you have, what the firm actually has or needs to develop, and the environment, the industry, your suppliers, your customers. Because we were saying in the last video that competition, that strategy is about that. Strategy is about connecting these two, about finding the right place in the industry for who you are. So therefore, the first thing you need to do to understand, the first thing you need to analyze in order to find your place is yourself. And within that, you need to understand your goals, your values. What are you here for? What is the basic value behind your technology? What is the basic value behind your business idea? What are you trying to achieve with this? Because if you don't have this clear, and believe me, a lot of companies don't, then it's gonna be way more difficult for you to find your place in the industry, to compete in the right way, to choose the right strategy. So now, what should be the goal of any firm? What goal do every firm, every company actually share? Well, to answer this question, let's look at Alfred Sloan, who was the chairman of General Motors. So a very, very wise, smart businessman. And what he believed is that the goal of any firm is to actually make money, is to actually bring more money than the one you are investing, to bring a return on capital. That is the main thing, especially if you're working at a startup. If you have a technology, an idea that you want to commercialize, investors are only going to invest in your company, in your idea, if you can guarantee that eventually you're gonna bring them more money than the money they are investing themselves. So that is the key goal here. Any firm needs to actually achieve this goal. So what is a good strategy then? So is a good strategy the strategy that brings about the greater return on capital? Well, in a way it is. That is the main objective of any strategy. To make sure that the company, the firm you create, brings profit to those who invest their money. So the purpose of any company, any firm, even startup companies, is to create value and to exchange the value that you create for money. So it's key here to understand what I have. Is it something somebody's willing to pay for it? And if the answer is yes, that means that there are customers out there, users out there, who are going to benefit from your service, from your technology, from your invention. And they're going to benefit because they're going to receive value from it. And the value is important to them because they're willing to pay money. They're willing to exchange the money they're willing to give you with the value you provide them with. So in a way, when we talk about value, it's not so much about focusing on the money. The money is the ultimate goal here. But in reality, what we are doing here is focusing on creating value for someone. Is there anybody out there with a problem I can resolve? Because if I can resolve that problem for them, then I'm gonna be able to ask those people for money. And the more value I create for them, the more money they're willing to pay. The example of the companies I've been working with. For example, Graphmatech, the graphene, customers are willing to pay money for that graphene because it's gonna resolve problems that they have. It's gonna help them create value in that way by reducing the amount of time, for example, they have to have their machines on and the time they have to have them off because of overheating. So that is the dynamic here. You need to identify somebody who has a problem that you can create value for, because they'll be willing to give you money and return some of that profit back to your investors. So at the end of the day, you're creating value for your customers when you obtain what we call value added. Meaning that the money you are spending in delivering value to your customers, the money you're spending into production, logistics, stuff that you need to develop your product, when you have all that money and all the money that you spend in there is actually less than what you actually get back from selling your solution to those who have a problem. So it's about that. It's about the difference between the value of a firm's output and the cost of its materials. That's what you have here in this diagram here, which we call a fishbone diagram. You have the expenses in one side and you have the revenues, how you're going to be making money in the other side. And the overall result of adding these two has to be positive so that you can return benefit to your investors. So if the key thing for creating value for your customers and therefore creating value for your investors is to find a problem that your customers might have, you need to convince them that what you have is the solution they're looking for. And that's why we talk about value proposition. A value proposition is a statement that is going to explain a need out there, a problem that somebody has. For example, machines overheat, therefore they have to be resting for a while to then restart again. That is a problem because you're producing less than you could if you could leave those machines running for longer. So, and then you need to show as well that you have the ability to listen to exactly what problem those using those machineries have. And with that idea, with that feedback that you get from your customers, you're able to think about your product. How can I resolve this problem for you? So how can I change my product so I give you the most value possible? So for example, the companies I've been working with, Graphomatech in this case, they do this. They basically have a value proposition. They actually say, you have overheating problems, I'm going to resolve it with microfilm. But then they need to talk to their customers and see exactly where the problem with overheating is and how that their product can actually help resolve that issue. So it's a constant back and forth communication with your customers. You really have an understanding of the problems you're facing if you have a constant communication with them. And then your product evolves. The same thing with another company, startup company I did consultancy for, where they had a material that absorbed humidity very well. So they ended up going into the makeup industry. But in order to create their value proposition, how exactly I'm going to resolve the problem of humidity in makeup, I need to work together with my customer. I need to co-develop my product with them. Getting that feedback is going to make it easier for you to have a strong value proposition that clearly states the problem you're resolving and how you're going to resolve that problem. We are talking about creating value and how we have to extract some profit out of the value. We have customers, we add value, we create value for them, we get money back from them. But is that all? Who are we creating value for? Who else should we care about? Because in a way, this idea of creating value for your customer is not as simple. Sometimes you need to take into account how you're creating value to other stakeholders. And as you can see here in this diagram for Merck, A given company can have many different stakeholders, like staff, the people who work for you. In order for you to produce a product that is going to cover the needs of your customers, you need to be creating value as well for your employees. Value not only in the form of a salary, but then as well in the form of satisfaction in the workplace, to feel that they are doing a great job. So in a way, this idea of creating profit, creating value becomes more complex. It's a balance among different stakeholders, different ways of understanding value. And great companies are the ones that can actually keep this balance right. You're creating value for your staff, you're creating value for the government, you are creating value to your staff, you're creating value to your investors, etc., etc., etc. Traditionally, business strategy scholars have thought about two different approaches of creating value. One is the shareholders approach, meaning that the main objective is to create value for your investors, for your shareholders. Then there is another approach that is the stakeholder approach, that is about, creating value for your staff, for the government, for society at large. But in a way, these two approaches are not incompatible. And a lot of companies in the past, and still nowadays, get this wrong. They think that their only focus should be their customers, profit, shareholders. But in reality, the paradox here is that if you really want to provide with the maximum value to your customers and therefore to your shareholders, you need to take into account the interest of the whole society. When you go against the interest of your society, when you go against the interests of your government, eventually things are going to turn against you and you're going to stop being able to provide with a service to your shareholders. So the idea here is just to think that the purpose of a strategy, the primary goal, is to create profit. But that in order to create profit, you need to take care of all those who have an input in your ability to create value. Being not only your customers, but your employees. You want to have motivated employees. For example, now a lot of companies are becoming more ethical in how they produce their clothes, for example. Zara, H&M, all those companies a few years ago had some people who weren't getting paid enough money to produce their clothes. But they know that that eventually is going to turn against them because customers won't want to buy those garments if they believe they have been produced by people who weren't getting paid enough. So again, you need to be creating value for all stakeholders involved in the process that you need to develop to provide with value to your customers and obtain profit for your shareholders. If the main goal of strategy choice, do you remember in the first class we were talking about corporate strategy, basically choosing what industry you're gonna use your resources, where you're gonna be competing. So that choice is important because different choices are gonna lead to different value. So you need to be looking, if you are trying to maximize value, especially for your shareholders, you need to be looking at that industry where you are gonna actually bring a larger profit. So we have an example here. The two companies I worked with in the past, okay? The first one, Disruptive Materials, they had this choice to make, to use their material that absorbs humidity very well. They either could go into drug development, Johnson & Johnson's, or they could go into L'Oreal makeup. So they had this choice to make. Which one is going to add more value? Well, in the long run, Johnson & Johnson's is going to add more value. Drug development is going to bring more money. But the development time was way longer, meaning that by the time they were going to make some money, they could be out of business because their cost would be so high that they would need to cover for that in some way. So that's why initially they went to the second one, because even though the final value they would get would be less, that value, that money, that profit would be more immediate. It would be easier for them, quicker for them to take it. So this is the kind of decision startup companies, especially those based on science, on a scientific product, have to face. So sometimes it's not that difficult, but the idea is the same thing. Which one is gonna maximize value? The same thing for Graphmatech. They had a choice between microchips and machinery. The same thing, microchips, probably more profit, longer development times. So again, which one is gonna bring more profit? And to be honest, companies keep changing their minds. They keep changing and shifting from one industry to another. So in principle, strategy is about choosing that course of action that is gonna maximize profit. And that means identifying different strategy alternatives. Am I gonna go with drug development, or am I gonna go with makeup? And then is about estimating the cash flow, basically meaning how much money I'm gonna make going into the future. And then you select that one that is gonna bring about the higher cash flow, net present value, or some other measure, financial measure that you might have. But at the end of the day, it's the same. It's choosing the one that is gonna bring more money. That's, in theory, that is the right thing to do. But in practice, things are way more difficult. Why? Well, first thing, because a cash flow, predicting how much you will be making with drug development or with makeup, is difficult to guess. It's not easy to understand or to know for certain how things are gonna be in 2-3 years' time. So then, this value maximization, this profit maximization, bringing a lot of money as much as you can now to your investors, can lead to shortism, can lead to a strategy that doesn't focus on the future. If you're just focused about bringing money as soon as possible. So many of the firms that are extremely successful, they don't focus on immediate goals. Are the ones that actually focus on having a bigger purpose, having a goal that is not directly profit. The idea here is very simple. The more you obsess about making money, the more likely you are to not make money. And that is a paradox. But I don't know if you like football or soccer, but it's the same idea. If you follow football and you know that some strategy when it comes to play football is about passing the ball, enjoying the game, and the understanding behind this is, if you focus on only scoring goals, you might be rushing things, you might be getting too stressed, and therefore you might be less likely to score a goal. But instead, if you focus on playing well, then you're more likely to score the goal. So this is the idea here. We are looking for profit, but we shouldn't be obsessing about profit. We should be focusing on something else, something great that is gonna lead to profit. Let me give you an example of what I mean by not focusing so much on shareholder value right away, on bringing profit right away. Let me look at this example from Boeing. Probably you all know this company. So from 1970 to 1995, the CEO at the time, and the strategy at the time, and the focus, the goal, was building great planes. So everybody in the company was focusing on that, from managers to engineers. Our objective is to build the best, the greatest planes ever. Because they understood that if you do that, if you achieve that, then you're gonna get profit. Then you're going to be covering the needs of your customer because your planes are great. You're going to cover those needs even better than your competitors. And therefore, you're going to make money. But the focus wasn't so much about making money. It was more about making great planes. But then, In 1996 to 2004, new management came to dominate Boeing, and now they focus on creating shareholder value. So what did they do? So they took measures that basically were going to lead to kind of immediate profit. Things like cutting down on research and development. They diversified into other industries. And they moved away from that original idea of building great planes. What was the consequence? Well, the consequence was that the shareholders, the first 2 years, were quite happy because reducing your research and development allows you to bring more cash to your shareholders because you're spending less. But when you think about the objective, the old goal of building great planes, then it's going to be a bit more difficult. Therefore, in the long run, Boeing started losing profit and the value of their shares stagnated. And eventually, this CEO was fired, and then another CEO was brought into place to go back to the old idea of creating great planes. So this is a really good example of the dangers of just focusing on shareholders' value. Yes, we want to bring value to shareholders. We need to bring a return on capital. We need to bring a return on the money they're investing. But the best way of doing that is not by focusing on doing it. It's by focusing on the product that is gonna resolve an issue, that is gonna resolve a problem that people, customers are gonna be willing to pay for. That should be the focus. And if you focus only on that, the money is gonna follow. So another example of how creating value is about this long-term vision. And this comes from this idea of real options, meaning that sometimes companies, they invest on something, on an option that is not going to bring shareholders value right away. So for example, Amazon has been investing a huge amount of money into a very secret project called 1492. In this project, apparently, they're working on drug development. They want to disrupt the drug industry. Now, that project, they've been working on it now for 6-7 years, and it hasn't brought any return on capital yet. But the idea is this. What they are doing is they are investing on an option of something that might happen in the future. That it means the fact that data is available there, and using that data might allow companies to develop better therapies. So they know that, and they have competence in data. So therefore, they're using that competence to buy into something that in the future might be key to disrupt the drug development industry. The same thing with Shell. Shell is actually now investing in hydrogen. Why? Because they know that now, as in today, still is not feasible to have cars that efficiently run on hydrogen. But they know that eventually it's gonna be the future. So they're investing money on this to have the option in the future to be one of the first providers of hydrogen. So again, there's no immediate return on capital in any of these two investments. They are more focusing on developing an idea, developing a product, the greatness of a product. Either making drug development better or making hydrogen engines better. That is the focus. But if their focus was shareholder value right away, they wouldn't be working on these projects. So again, this is the paradox. Creating shareholder value is about not focusing on creating shareholders value, but focusing on creating something great that is going to create value for somebody, for a group of people who have a problem. So in a way, what we're saying here is that the essential element to really create value is to have a purpose, is to have a long-term idea of serving a solution to a problem. There is a problem in terms of materials. There is a problem when it comes to circuits, that they actually overheat. Therefore, I have a product, and my vision is to create the perfect product that can resolve that industry problem. So companies like the ones we have here in this slide, if you look at the websites, they have a purpose. And companies that have long-term success are the ones with a clear purpose, like Lego, okay? That is to inspire and develop the builders of tomorrow. But that idea is powerful because that allows them to decide what to develop and what not. Do you remember in the first topic we were talking about how strategy, in a way, is a way of helping you make decisions. If your long-term vision is to create a generation of builders of tomorrow, then that's gonna lead to what kind of products you're gonna be creating in Lego. And the same thing for any company. You need that kind of vision, that kind of idea, instead of focusing so much on bringing right away shareholders value. Any great company you know of, they all have this kind of long-term vision of creating value, of creating something great.